What's going on, guys? This is the Brigade once again, and we're back at it with another session of Killzone Shadow Fall. Alright guys, so in the last video we were kind of talking about some of the changes that they've made, in particular about some of the nerfing that they've been doing, right? And I basically still maintain that they're really making a lot of unnecessary nerfs. So the last nerf that we're talking about, in the event that you guys are not familiar, are the changes that they made to the petricide grenades. You know, as some of you may know, when the game was first released, basically the petricide grenades were all the same color, right? Then a few people were making complaints and they were saying, well, we need to be able to identify them. My thing is, you don't need to identify them. I mean, the fact is, if you are in the middle of a petricide grenade and you feel your character taking damage, like, how is that not signal enough for you to get out of it? But, you know, be that as it may, they called for some changes and then they made yet another change. Well, actually, they made their first change. And the first change was that the friendly petricide grenades would no longer damage you, right? And in addition to them no longer damaging you, there was also a small red indicator at its core. So in other words, as long as you point it at the petricide grenade, like, you could easily tell the difference. And actually, not only was it a visual indicator, but it was also a physical indicator, because your controller would start to vibrate, and that would be an indicator that it's an enemy. So in other words, you had the physical cue, which is the vibrating of the controller, in addition to you know, just basically looking at it and seeing the red core of the petricide grenade. But guess what? That just simply wasn't enough, and Guerrilla Games decided to make more changes for these casuals, you know, for a lot of these guys who needs their hand held for every single thing. So now we have the petricide grenades with the huge pulsating red, basically flashing stop sign in the middle of it. And now, you know, within the last few days, I've noticed some postings for them to nerf the ground support turrets. And the thing that I hate about that, you know, one guy in particular, and actually I respect his game, you know, and that's a posting from good old Muffin Man. You know, I respect the man's game. You know, as far as his playing abilities, I've played both with him and against him, and that guy's pretty good. But at the end of the day, I think his suggestion is bad. Now, here's a guy who's more competitive than anything. Now, does he participate in pubs? Yeah, he plays in pubs, but I think he's more of a competitive type guy. And I think in the competitive arena, yes, it may be a problem. But in pubs, dude, some of the things that he was saying, like he would say something about, you know, look at the distance, look at the tracking, they have more health than humans and all these other things. And I'm thinking to myself, like, come on now, Muffin. You know, I'm going to assume he has played Killzone 3 and Killzone 2. Those ground support turrets also had more health than humans. They also had good tracking. They also had, and they also could shoot at a far distance. So in other words, where is all of this call for these ground support turrets being nerfed? Personally, I really hope that they do not nerf anything else. They already basically handicapped the sickle. The sickle is crap now. And for a lot of you guys that may not be familiar with the game, the sickle is basically a shotgun that used to be a one-shot kill at a reasonable distance. Now, keep in mind, was the sickle annoying? It was extremely annoying. I got sick and tired of people basically buffing their KDRs by just running around and one-shotting people. Did it take skill? No, it didn't take any skill. But just because it's annoying and just because it doesn't take a lot of skill doesn't mean that it needed to be nerfed. And let me give you an example. For a lot of people who may be new to Killzone, perhaps the sickle was a good weapon to help them get used to the aiming. Right? Because in other words, if you have some of these other weapons where you have to sit here and concentrate your aiming, because keep in mind, there's no aiming assist. So the sickle could have been a useful tool for some of the newer players. So I really don't understand why they nerfed that. In addition to that, they also nerfed the voltage, which is actually one of my favorite weapons. Now, I've heard somebody say that there was a glitch to where you could one-shot kill. I don't know anything about that glitch, but what I do know is that it was unnecessary for them to reduce the rate of fire. The rate of fire was fine, right? It wasn't really meant to be one of those run and gun type weapons. Could you run a gun with it? I mean, you could, because I did, and in some cases now I do. I mean, but pretty much now I only use the voltage for area denial. I don't really run and gun with it the way that I used to prior to the nerf. So I'm just saying all this to say that they're making so many changes, and I think it's to appease to these crybabies because they want to maintain the player base that they have, and I really think that that's a mistake. Now, another one of the problems that I forgot to talk about in the first video with regard to spotlighting the classic war zones is the fact that, dude, these pub stumpers are bad enough on 12v12s. They're bad enough. But if you're going to showcase the classic war zones, think about these classic pub stumpers. Rodham, which those guys are cool, but dude, you just can't deny that they're pub stumpers, right? 4JA, those guys are cool. I'm cool with some of them. Some of those guys are on my friends list, but you can't deny that those guys are pub stumpers. Now, I'm not saying all of them, but seeing that the player base is what it is, a lot of times I find myself playing with and against some of the same people. And in most cases, if I run into Rodham, it's at least 3 or 4 of them, at least. Right? And that's just a conservative estimate. There's been times where it's been 6 or 7 of them on one team. Rave. Whenever I see Rave, in most cases, like 4 or 5 of them. Right? So in other words, if you're going to spotlight those and you guys care so much about making the game attractive, have you guys thought about what will happen if some of these pub stomper clans start getting in here and running these new players off? Dude, at least in a 12v12 you have an opportunity for some newer players to at least get paired off with some experienced players, so it can kind of offset the imbalance. In a 7v7, dude, that's perfect, because in other words, in the PS4 chat, in the PS4, what do you call that? Well, let's just say chat. I can't think of it off the top of my... party. You can have up to 8 members. So if you can have up to 8 members, dude, you can basically fill up your whole team in a classic war zone with your clan, assuming that you have at least 7 members. So your arguments are weak, because in other words, whereas you may think it's more accessible to them, have you thought about the fact that 7 people from one clan or 7 people from an extremely experienced backgrounds could pair off and just dominate pubs in classic Warzone? So how appealing is that for new players? You know what I'm saying? To just get dominated by really experienced players. So I'm arguing, and not even that, dude. I've tried that classic Warzone and I hate it. Not only because it's small, but also a lot of times I get paired off with some brand new people who are stuck in one area, don't know what to do, don't know what the objectives are. And at least in a 12v12, it might be a chance, and we're just assuming that you're just going pure pubs. We're not even talking about pairing off with your friends. This is just assuming that, you just started a game and you just want to join. At least in a random 12v12, there's a high likeliness that you would be paired off with at least some experienced players. Dude, for the last few days I have tried the classic Warzone, and I've been paired off with a lot of sub 200s. I know a lot of you guys are going to say, well, the number of challenges is not an indicator of a person's skill. No, it is not an indicator of a person's skill, but it is an indicator of a person's experience. And even though you might not be the most skilled, the fact that you have experience and the fact that you may know what to do during a certain particular objective gives you an advantage over people who are new and who may be lost because they don't know what they don't know what the objectives are. So so-called skill doesn't necessarily contribute to a win. Experience can. Because in other words, if you have 7 people who are not really skilled, but they understand the importance of spawn beacons and everything else, dude, they can be pretty challenging if you're faced against, you know, a skilled group, but they don't know what the fuck to do. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm just really disappointed at this whole spotlighting the classic war zones, and I really hope they do something about it soon. Now, another thing that I want to talk about, because like I said before, and actually it's not really another thing, I'm still kind of piggybacking off the whole, you know, ground support turret nerf that some people are asking for. Once again, you know, there are people who will make complaints about these, or they may make complaints about the air drones. And like I've said plenty of times, the issue is not with the drones themselves. The issue is the lack of initiative with the players. Dude, anyone who has been on my team will tell you, or anyone who has played against me, dude, I switch classes all the time. I might start off with the support class throughout a spawn beacon. My next death, I could switch out to a scout class depending upon what the objective is. I could start off with the assault class, but if I notice we're lacking spawn beacons, I will immediately switch off to support class. No one is locked into a particular class. So it all depends. So in other words, if you're fighting a clan like Rave, right now, keep in mind, I'm not hating on Rave, but you simply cannot deny that Rave, the whole Rave clan, and I'm saying, well, actually, I can't say the whole. I haven't played against all of them. But most of the time when I'm playing against those pub stompers, they are heavily dependent upon ground support turrets and air drones. Heavily dependent upon them. When I play against Rodham, another example, dude, I'm not hating on them. They're cool as a clan and all that. But you still cannot deny that those guys are heavily dependent. And I'm talking, now keep in mind, just because I say that they are heavily dependent on them, I'm not saying that ground support turrets and using them are bad. Let's make sure we keep that, we maintain that understanding. I'm not saying they're bad, but what I'm saying is, if you're pub stomping and collectively everyone on your team is just throwing down air support drones or ground support turrets, dude, that could be tough. And you just cannot deny that these two clans and other ones, I'm just thinking of 2 off the top of my head, like when they're winning, they don't really throw that many ground support turrets or air drones down. When they're having a hard time, dude, they are all throwing down air drones and ground support turrets. I have played against them plenty of times. And the issue is that pissed me off, because as soon as I see that I'm against Rave or Rodham or some of these other clans, guess what I do? Switch off to assault. I find on the map where they have centralized all their ground support turrets and air drones, and I throw down one of those assault class emitters. More people need to do that instead of sitting back and complaining, getting on the forums and saying how everything needs to be nerfed. No, those things don't need to be nerfed. You people need to show initiative. You people simply need to show initiative. If you guys have spiders on your pulvers or on your stovas, and you see that your team is spamming the shit out of those ground support turrets or air drones, you need to switch it out to the missiles. If a lot of you salt class who like sprinting around, with the speed boost, but you realize that the opposing team is using a lot of turrets and air drones, you guys need to switch out the speed boost and jump over to the e-pulse emitters. And if you're not going to do that, then don't get on the forums and complain. Like I said before, a lot of these issues have nothing to do with the game itself. It has a lot to do with people who lack initiative. May it be healing, may it be spawn beacons, may it be dealing with air drones, may it be dealing with ground support turrets. Initiative is the issue, not the game, not balancing, it's initiative. If more people showed initiative, then a lot of these war zones would have better results. Now keep in mind, there's a big difference between the competitive aspect and the public aspect. I'm talking mostly from the public aspect, because we don't even have clans out. We don't have the full rollout of clan support. Alright, so that just about sums this video up. I know I've been rambling, but hey, I hope you guys enjoyed part 2. And until next time, Martyrs Brigade is out.